Hi, it's Maija here with my September reads and receipts, and my TBR count at the start of the month was 79 books. Let's start with the books that I read for the Space Opera September Readathon, which was hosted by Thomas from SFF 180. And the first thing that I read for the readathon was On a Red Station Drifting by Aliette Bodard, and this is an old ebook that I got in a Hugo Voters packet. And this I read for the challenges of reading a novella and reading 2 space operas written by women. This is part of the Bodard Shuya universe, and this is set in the Dai Viet Empire, which is currently at war. There are 2 point of view characters. The one of them is Lynn, who is a former magistrate and a current refugee with a secret, who arrives on the Prosper space station to meet some distant relatives because she has no other place to go. And the other point of view character is like the matriarch of the family, the station mistress Kieron, who basically runs the whole family and the whole space station. Oh, and the space station is also a character. The space station is also alive, but it is faltering. I always enjoy reading about the Shuya universe space stations and spaceships, which are sentient and also human-birthed. This novella focuses on the 2 women that I talked about and how they constantly misunderstand each other and read each other wrong. Their personalities don't really mesh, and they make huge assumptions about each other. I really enjoyed reading this. The main character's relationship is really tense, and then there is the theme of family and obligations. But I didn't connect emotionally with this, and I gave this one 3 stars. The second book that I read for Space Opera September was A Different Light by Elizabeth A. Lynn, and this one was for the challenges of reading a book published before you were born. This is from 1979, and also the Read 2 Space Operas written by women. And this one was an owned ebook of mine. So this is a science fiction story about Jimson Aleka, who has lived his whole life on this one planet, even though space travel is possible in this future, because he has terminal cancer that requires constant medication, and it would be harder to treat if he was to go into space. Jimson feels very isolated in a world where most diseases are curable and easily treatable, but his form of cancer isn't. The story really starts when Jimson receives a message from his former lover, the space captain Russell O'Neill, and decides to leave the planet in search of him, and also he's bored of his planet and bored of his art and really wants to experience something new. This one is very readable. The writing grabbed me from the start, and I read a huge chunk of it in one go. The plot events of this were a bit all over the place. I like the beginning of Jimson visiting and learning about these different space stations and planets, but when we meet Russell, the plot turns into a caper for a while. Russell is sort of a smuggler, you see, and Jimson just joins into one of his missions to spend more time with him. And I didn't really care about that particular part of the plot. Speaking about Russell, who is the love interest, he is no dashing space captain. Well, he sort of is. He has the looks and the profession, but he is very flawed. Russell has a definite fear of death, and he doesn't know how to cope with Jimson's situation. Also, this romantic interest beats the main character twice in the book, and I found it very hard to have stakes in their relationship after that. So more than that messy relationship, this book is mainly about Jimson's journey. Him wanting to live his life and confront his death on his own terms, and how he deals with his art, and with the knowledge that his life will end soon. This one was a very fascinating read. The writing style was very enjoyable, but I couldn't quite get a full grip on it in the end, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I will try something else from Lynn in the future. Then I read Hexarchate Stories by Yoon. This one was a library ebook, and this one was for the challenge of reading a diverse read. And this is a collection of short stories set in the Machineries of Empire universe. Some stories were very short, like flash fiction short, and then there were a couple of longer ones. There was also a wide variety of topics and characters that it followed. Some were more character pieces from characters that we know, or background for those characters. Some of them were new characters having new adventures in the same universe, and some of them were more like stories deepening the world and the lore. I like the longer stories the best, especially the Battle of Candle Arc and Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon was actually sort of an epilogue story set after the events of the main trilogy. It followed the main characters, and it felt very relevant and most fun to follow, because I wanted to know what happened to these characters afterwards. And I did find a couple of the shorter ones interesting as well, especially with the ones focusing on the main characters' childhoods. The 2 were Silence and Birthdays that I enjoyed the most. I gave this one 3 stars, which is my go-to rating, it seems, for short story collections, because there are some that I enjoy and some that I don't. Then I read Illuminae by Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff, an owned physical book, yay, for the readathon for the challenge of reading a book over 500 pages. And this one is the very hyped story about 2 teens. It's a young adult science fiction book. The 2 teens are Katie and Ezra, and they are an ex-couple who are among the survivors when this mega corporation attacks their planet. And the teens are rescued but end up on 2 different spaceships. The spaceships are on the run from the mega Omega Corporation spaceship who's following them wants to kill the last survivors, the last witnesses. To add to the danger, the AI called Aiden from one of these ships got some hits in the battle and is sort of going rogue now. And the AI was the biggest reason I wanted to pick up this book. This book is told in the form of different documents like chat messages, military reports, emails, security reports, interviews, and things like that. And I found the formatting to be fun. It brought some variety with different layouts. It made the book quicker to read. It added a bit of a unique twist on quite a regular storyline, if I can say that. But I didn't care for the characters. I found Ezra in particular to be really annoying, and a lot of the adult characters sounded like the teen main characters. The writing could be overly dramatic in places where I didn't believe it, when it wasn't the teenage characters, when it was like adult soldiers writing soldier reports, for example, and I wanted more from the story and I wanted more from the AI. I don't feel like Aidan brought anything new and interesting to the table. I love AI characters. I really wanted to love this messed up one, but I didn't. I won this book from a giveaway from Libby Stevenson, and I'm sad that I didn't like it more. I gave this one 2.5 stars. But this does bring my TBR count to 78 books. That was the end of my Space Opera September reading, but I thought I'd talk about this space horror comic next because it sort of fits into the theme. This Outer Darkness Volume 1, Each Other's Throats by John Layman, who wrote Chew, and Afu-chan, who I haven't read any of his work before. So this is an owned comic of mine. This one was on my most anticipated comics list. I loved what I'd seen of the art, and the looks of the characters were really drawing me in. There's all sorts of different kinds of aliens, but I have no idea how to rate this. The first 3 issues were so promising. I was expecting to love this, and I couldn't wait to see where the story went, and in the end it went to a really boring place. I disliked the last 2 issues. So, in this, there's this disgraced captain, Joshua Rick, who is given his old ship, the Kieron, back, and a new crew for it. He has to go on this retrieval mission to retrieve some person, and it's very hush-hush, we don't know what the mission is. He does take an old friend of his with him as a special advisor, but everyone else is new. The setting was amazing. It's set the space in this universe is haunted. There's like monsters and ghosts and everything in space. You never know what you're gonna encounter. You might get possessed, who knows. Also, the ship, Kieron, is run by a god engine. So there's an actual god in the ship, and it has to get sacrifices in order to run. Rick himself would have preferred something called a hate engine instead of a god engine. That just sounds so interesting. I want to know what is a hate engine. It's so neat. Oh, and there are mathematicians who sort of do things that look like magic, and there are exorcists on board, and they can bring dead crew people back to life. That's neat. What a great world, what a cool looking characters, what a great premise. I can't wait to see where this goes. Especially this character, she's so cool, and she was so intriguingly introduced. Like, it was said that she was a mutineer, but she was like back on the crew now because the captain says so. And wow, I can't wait to see what's her deal. Oh, we don't really get back to her. She goes on a space mission with this dude, and I thought we would get back to her during this mission, but this dude actually becomes the focal point of the plot, and I didn't care about him at all. Captain Rick and his best friend are assholes. Okay, that's fine. I'm interested to see what they are planning and what happens with the crew doesn't really like them. But then there was this another really cool looking and interesting character, and there was an issue about his backstory, and I wanted to learn more about him. Turns out he's an asshole too. I'm beginning to think that everyone is an asshole here, and that's boring. There are very interesting looking female characters in this, but we don't really get into any of them. There's this cool Sphinx cat lady looking oracle who has a cat. And the only thing that I learned about her during this volume was that she likes to turn into a young sexy cat woman to have sex with the advisor. Oh, and 2 other women are impaled in almost identical panels. So after those 3 issues of interesting setup, the plot turns into a basic there's a monster on the loose, watch it kill people, there's a lot of blood, and it's so boring, and the beginning seemed like it was going somewhere really interesting. I took a look at the synopses of issues that have come out after this one, and I don't have high hopes for them. I did learn that we do get the back issue of the interesting mutineer female character in one of the issues, but mainly the plots did seem to be about different situations where the crew can get killed and then brought back to life. Basically, I stopped reading Saga when it began to seem like it was about introducing new cool looking characters and then killing them off. And this one seems to be the same, except that after killing the characters, you can resurrect them and kill them again. And this is a real shame because I really like the art, the world, and the first 3 issues. The premise was just so cool. Let me know if you have read more of this and if it doesn't go where I think it was going. Another killing rampage sort of situation. So I have no idea how to rate this because it had a great start but a very disappointing end. Maybe 2 stars? I don't know. Reading this brings my TBR to 77. Okay, calm down. Then I read another ebook and that was Snowspelled by Stephanie Burgis, and this is the first volume in the Harwood spellbook series, and this is an owned ebook of mine, and it's a Fancy of Manners novella which is set in an alternate England called Angland, where Cassandra Harwood, who's the main character, then the former first woman magician who has now lost her magic, she has to go to a house party that includes her ex-fiancé and a lot of gentleman magicians whose presence reminds her of what she's lost, and they end up snowed in, and there's a malevolent elf lord around making Cassandra's life hard. This one was very cozy and fun. It was exactly what I needed at the time. It was a novella, so the main obstacles, both the romance and the plot, were very easily solved, especially the romantic ones. And the world with the women being the politicians and men being the magicians was really interesting. And the characters were pretty fun, and I want to see what Cassandra does next. There are more novellas in this series. The Elf Lord was fine. I was really excited about there being an Elf Lord. I love like stuck-up malevolent elf lords. It felt a bit weird that he was also a chauvinist because that seems like such a human thing to be and not an elf thing, but you know. Also, if you read this, I really want a novella of Mrs. Seabury. She was an old lady with an intriguing past, and I want a novella especially about her past, but also what she gets up to in the future. I gave this one 4 stars. I also read 2 other comics from my most anticipated list in September, so I'm going to talk about those next. In fact, the rest of the books that I'm going to talk about in this read section are going to be comics, so if you are not interested in that, there is a timestamp in the description for when the receipts part start, so if you don't read comics, you can skip to that. First, I read Die Volume 1, Fantasy Heartbreaker by Kieron Gillen and Stephanie Hans. This I read from the library. This is a fancy comic about a group of friends who are now adults and they get sucked back into this fancy world into which they were sucked in as teenagers when they were playing a role-playing game, so they get sucked into that world. And this one has a dark atmosphere and quite painterly artwork. The setting of this was really interesting. I wanted to know what would happen next, but didn't have a big hook for me, like an element that really spoke to me or one character that I was really interested to follow. Some issues, I have to say, were a bit of a slog, but I will check out the next issue anyway. I gave this one 3 stars. The next most anticipated comic that I read, also from the library, was Blackbird Volume 1, The Great Beast by Sam Humphries and Jen Bartell. And in this one, Nina Rodriguez learns about the hidden magical world in LA when she almost dies as a teenager, and after that she has been hunting for any traces of that world. And now her sister is kidnapped and she gets tangled in this magical world again. Jen Bartell's art is really beautiful, especially her cover illustrations, and the character designs are really interesting. The interior illustrations are a bit stiff. I don't think she has done many comic interiors before, but I think she'll just keep getting better. Some of the transitions were unclear or confusing. I don't know if that was because of the panel work or because of the script. Sam Humphries wrote Jonesy, which was this young adult comedy comic, completely different from this one, and I don't think I remember any of those transition hiccups from that, but the colors by Triona Farrell were also really beautiful. Not much was explained about the magic of this world, and the dialogue was at times somewhat underdeveloped. It has some potential, but things didn't quite flow that well, and I'm not sure if I'll check out the next volume. I gave this one 2.5 stars. Then I read I Moved to Los Angeles to Work in Animation by Natalie Nourigat, and this is an own physical comic. I hauled and read this in September. There was the Helsinki Comics Festival, and I caved and bought something. So my TBR went up to 78, but then back to 77. This one was fun and informational. It's more of a how-to book than a memoir, which I would have known if I had actually read the back cover. Nourigat goes through her own experience in moving to Los Angeles to work in animation, and she gives out tips and tells how things work. If you're actually planning to move to LA to work in animation, add a star or 2 to my rating. I went to art school, and the topic of the animation industry in LA is interesting to me, just not relevant as a how-to book. So this book is very text heavy, which I didn't mind, except for the interviews at the back. They had so much text and so few images that I think these would have actually felt less heavy if they were just text with an illustration or 2. I gave this one 3 stars. Then I did a reread. I reread Courtney Crumrin Volume 1, Courtney Crumrin and the Night Things by Ted Naifeh. I reread this with Frankie Reads. This is the first volume of one of my favorite comic series, an early young adult fantasy comic. Courtney Crumrin moves into a new town, to the house of her great uncle Aloysius Crumrin with her parents, and soon she learns that there is this world of night creatures of the Fae and magic just beyond her doorstep, and actually inside her doorstep, because her great uncle is actually a warlock. Now, this first volume comprised of shorter, more episodic tales focusing on Courtney moving to this new town, starting at the new school, learning about magic. It's not as strong as the following volumes, which have longer storylines, and Naifeh is still getting the hang of drawing these characters, but this volume does a good job of setting up the world and the characters. And Courtney and Aloysius' relationship is one of my favorite relationships in any book. I gave this one 4 stars. I also continued on with 2 series, but I don't have much to say about them, so I'm just gonna quickly say that I also read Delicious in Dungeon Volume 5 by Ryoko, the comic fantasy monster cooking manga. And this volume wasn't one of my favorite volumes. It focused a lot on characters that weren't the main group and who I didn't care about, at least not yet. And it had less cooking and less laughs. I gave this one 3 stars. I also read volume 7 of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. This one is also one that I cheekily bought in September, but I also read it in September, so again, up to 78, back to 77. And this is the continuation of the dark fairy tale manga of Teacher and Shiva, a monster and a little girl who are currently on the run. The secrets and mysteries of both their lives continue, but we don't really ever seem to get any answers. So there are definitely some pacing issues with the series, but there's still this charm, this slow, quiet atmosphere of the books. The line work in this is as beautiful as ever. It's sort of dark and fragile and scratchy, and I really like it. I gave this one 3 stars. So it's time to move on to the receipts. Did I make any progress in my A to Z TBR project? And no, I didn't. Then the TBR chart challenge. I am still working on the read a book that was featured in a Try a Chapter tag video. I am now 30% of the way through Experimental Film by Gemma Files. I know it seems like I've been reading this forever, and it feels like that too, but I actually started reading this again. So I started back from the beginning after dragging reading the book over the move and the move back and everything. So this is still ongoing. I had pulled the second challenge of reading a book with one word title, and I did that with Illuminae. I planned to do that with Raw Blood, but Raw Blood is actually in my October TBR now and not in my September one, but I did complete that. So that means I get to draw another challenge. Let's go. There's a bunch of them here. This one. Book haul revisit pick. So this is a book that I have shown on a book haul revisit video, a book from an old book haul that I haven't read yet. This will need a bit more research work. I need to watch a couple of my book haul revisit videos in order to see what I want to pick. For a mini haul part, I did pick up The Girl from the Other Side Volume 7 like I showed, and I moved to Los Angeles to work in animation. Then I also picked out the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I was out with Reija and I've been planning to pick these up. I have never owned these. I have read and reread these, but always from the library. So now I have Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest as my own physical books. These don't add to my TBR. Then I also got sent the special issue of Uncanny magazine called Disabled People Destroy Fantasy, which I helped kickstart. So this one has pieces of fantasy short fiction written by disabled authors. Now we're moving on to my favorite part, can I buy? Because yes, I can, because I read these physical books in September. I need to read 3 to get to buy one. I read 4. Even though I bought 2 of these in September, we're not gonna talk about that. I have actually already ordered the book that I want, and it just arrived today, and that is The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. This is her first horror novel. I don't know much about this, except a woman goes to take care of her dead grandmother's house, like pack it up or something, and there's something in the nearby woods. This paperback has this weird gritty texture in the parts that aren't shiny, and I don't really like the feel of it. It feels kind of gross. Maybe that's like to add to the horror factor. But anyway, this is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. Really want to get this soon. And then I also went and bought a comic. I bought the final volume of The Wicked and the Divine by Kieron, Gillen and Jamie McKelvey. This is volume 9, OK. And this finishes the whole series. It's an urban fantasy series about guards being reincarnated as young people who are pop stars. It's quite convoluted at this point. There are a lot of characters. I have no idea how this is gonna end. So the next question is, can I buy an ebook? And yes, I can, and I'm gonna cheat a bit and I'm gonna buy 2 because I wanna buy the next Harwood spellbook novellas by Stephanie Burgis. I read Snowspelled, then there's Spellswept, which is a prequel novella, and then there's Thornbound, which is the actual second novella. So this is the prequel. It's about Cassandra's brother's wife, and this one is the second novella. So here we go. And here they are. So next, can I borrow a book from the library? And the answer is yes, but this one I actually don't know what I am going to borrow, so I'm gonna need your help with this. I'm gonna say a couple of things that I'm thinking about, and then you can chime in. So the first is maybe Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. A young adult fantasy would be quick to read, and there's this TV series coming, so I wanted to try it out. I haven't read anything from Bardugo before. And then there's Unraveling by Karen Lord. That's her newest book. I haven't read anything from Lord before either. Or then I would be on the mood for some horror. So either The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell, or then The Quick by Lauren Owen, which a friend of mine recommended to me. Let me know if you have read any of those, if you have any ideas what I should borrow. So we have only 2 things left now. This is quite a long video. What I currently have out from the library. I have A Small Charred Face by Kazuki Sakuraba, still. This is a Japanese vampire novel. Then I have Blanca y Roja by Anna Marie McLemore, which is a fantasy a fairy tale retelling. Then I have Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, which is a young adult book about zombies, and it's a historical fiction. I picked this up on a whim. Then I have Maalarisiskot by Reetta Niemensivu, and this is a new Finnish comic about a group of women artists, real historical women painters from Finland. And finally, I have The Umbrella Academy Volume 2, Dallas by Gerard Way and Gabrielle Ba. And this one I have already read, but I picked this up in preparation for Volume 3, which has come out, and I'm on the list from the library. And finally, the stats. In September, I read 11 books. I read 2,444 pages. I read on average 81 pages a day and took on average 6 days to read a book. And my current physical TBR number is 77 books. So we're going down again from the Worldcon haul, slowly, but maybe surely. Guess we're gonna see how I did in October. But that's all from me for now, and I'll see you in my next video.